What's happening, everybody? John Hendrix here alongside Ross Jackson for Saints News Network, coming at you with another recap of OTAs. OTAs are in the books, Ross, man. It's good to be able to see all this stuff, but how you doing? Because we got minicamp right around the corner.
Yeah, I know it's a quick turnaround until we get back into there. Then all of a sudden it just goes quiet, goes dark for a month until training camp. So it's been exciting to get to watch some football, watch it with you, and be able to you'll be able to break it down and talk about it, man. How are things for you?
Good, man. Just kind of like you. It's exciting to have football back in here and then be able to see everything. And then we got minicamp right behind, and then it's just gonna kind of be the dry spell. So.
Mm-hmm.
I don't like that period. Like, it's good to recharge your batteries before, but then once it gets, training camp, once it gets here, I mean, you're there like pretty much 6 days a week, honestly,
Right.
and all the types of things. But it'll come, it'll pass, and all that good stuff. But let's get down to business, Ross. Let's talk about OTAs. I had to get that in. Let's talk about OTAs, man. So obviously yesterday, the highlight. I mean, you can't miss it, but Michael Thomas is out there. We weren't expecting it. So like we got wind of it. We were not expecting to see Michael Thomas because DA talked about it. Mickey Loomis talked about it. They said training camp was kind of his target, but seeing him out there, big deal, not a big deal. Talk about your thoughts and observations from MT being in the lineup yesterday.
Yeah, no, I do think it's a big deal. I mean, it's well ahead of the expected timeline, which is that he would be out there day one of training camp. I sort of expected day one of training camp not to be a hit the ground running, him being out there full speed, full go, as he mentioned, but instead for training camp, the beginning of training camp to kind of be the beginning of the ramp up to get him where he needed to be partway through, a couple weeks into training camp. But seeing him out there on the last Tuesday of OTAs, knowing that very well means he's going to be out there Wednesday and Thursday, knowing that he was also out there with Derek Carr on Monday, who mentioned he had spent the past couple days, throwing passes to him and kind of getting to build that communication. It kind of just goes to show you that training camp day one is not just a get Michael Thomas out on the field situation, but it goes back out to last year when they surprised us with Michael Thomas being a full participant in the first day of training camp. So I do think it's huge for New Orleans, and obviously huge for Michael Thomas too, who's very clearly committed to making his return for the New Orleans Saints.
Yeah, and let me just clarify. So he was there, but not participating in drills, just
Correct.
To make sure everybody is aware on that. But again, yeah, surprised to see him again for training camp. He's going to be full speed, is what he told us after practice. So I mean, this is gargantuan news. And the thing is, you see the body language, you see him there, and Ross, you can back me up on this. Last year in training camp, this wasn't just a guy who just like he's looks Mike, he's just doing his things. Like, this guy was dominating training camp. Like, he was like, people, I tell that people on the radio all the time, like, or just anything, is like, we didn't fabricate that. Michael Thomas looked outstanding last season in training camp. We thought he was going to be that guy. Week one in Atlanta looked really good. I mean, he looked awesome, but another injury, another setback, all that other crazy stuff. But, just being out there, seeing him integrate with everybody else, catching passes with Derek Carr, catching passes off to the side while the team's doing other drills is big. Yeah. Separate sessions indoors because we had some more weather. This time it was actually real. We had downpour and thunder,
actual weather this time.
The actual weather this time. Yeah. So we had that too. But, just seeing him just kind of, even if it's not full speed, Mike, at OTAs, I mean, again, there's reason to be super excited about that.
Yeah, for sure. And one of the things that I've mentioned before is that you'll see a lot of people who are going to say, well, I don't buy into it until I see him out on the field and see him in game during the regular season. And I understand that, but that doesn't mean that we should dismiss a big step forward for him like this. And John, like, when we saw Michael Thomas out there, it's not just a situation to where we saw him, I don't know, dredging around and kind of taking his time and doing other things. Like, he wasn't running, but he's running these routes. When they needed him to run like a 15-yard route down the field, they would start him 10 yards down the field so that he wasn't putting too much pressure. That's probably similar to like Jameis Winston was only allowed to throw so many yards downfield when he was rehabbing his knee. I imagine that there's still a part of the rehabilitation process for Michael Thomas that doesn't, that maybe long strides and bursts aren't great for the ankle still. But look, no hardware, He's smiling. He's confident. He's fully committed to this team. He continues to address that. The narrative might say that and really the narrative hasn't said this for a little while, but there was a pervasive narrative over the last, let's just say 24 months that, the Saints and Michael Thomas were at odds. And even if that was true, it doesn't feel like that's been the case here recently. And it certainly doesn't feel like the case now. And he's continued to clarify that as well. And so, they did something we've never seen before at a practice or OTA or training camp or anything, to where the entire team went to one field on the outdoors. There's one field, and then right next to that, parallel to that, is another football field. The entire team went to the other football field except for the 3 quarterbacks and Michael Thomas, who were throwing as he was running routes and things like that. And it's one of those things where you can kind of see, okay, this team is committed to getting Michael Thomas back, and Michael Thomas is committed to being back for the team.
Yeah, and look, we could spend this whole entire time, we could spend the next hour talking about Michael Thomas, just the impact that he can make. But one of the things I want to hit on before we kind of move on from Michael Thomas is the comments Derek Carr made. Really interesting that he talked about his relationship with Mike, building that, just talking about, he's a big reason he came here, just the vision that it all came together for a reason, saying, Mike, are you going to be there? Like, are you going to be back with the Saints type thing? And just even the things about the openness between the chemistry, saying, Drew, or Derek asking, Mike, well, how did Drew do it? How did Drew throw the ball? How did Drew place it? And, and kind of having a push-pull relationship where you have wondering how Devontae Adams did stuff and stuff like that. Just talk a little bit about that. Like, I mean, that's huge. You want that. It seems like a no-brainer, but this is pretty good chemistry in the making if it all transpires.
Yeah, I think what it shows you is that both Michael Thomas and Derek Carr love the minutia of football, but also understand that the nuance is what makes them great, right? Like, nuance is what takes you from being a good football player to being a great football player. And I asked Dennis Allen something similar to this last year around the idea of when you get a draft pick like a Pete Werner, or you get a draft pick like an Alontae Taylor, it's different than getting a 5th, 6th, 7th round draft pick that you're trying to develop and you're trying to take from good to great. How do you get a guy, instead of making sort of the leap from, 1 to 50, or 1 to 99, how do you help them make the leap from 99 to 100? How do you help them make the leap from great to elite? Those are the things that are really tough. And it's always about nuances and attention to detail. That's the question that almost any coach will give you. And what you're seeing are nuances, attention to detail. You can see how particular both of these players are, to the point where Derek Carr is saying, it's important for us to be out on the field because I don't throw a football the same way that everybody else throws a football. And no two people throw a football the same. So the way you catch it has to be slightly different. What's the spin on it? All of these other things. And so you can see sort of the attention to detail. I don't feel like we have seen that level of attention to detail from the offense since Drew Brees. So this is something that's new. Not to compare Derek Carr and Drew Brees, because they're not comparable at all. But the idea of bringing that type of nuance, that type of minutia, that type of attention to detail back to this offense is something that should translate into more efficiency from the offense, which they had very little efficiency last year. And so when you have a guy like Michael Thomas, who sees the field a very specific way, working with Derek Carr, who sees the field his own specific way, the two of them working to see the field the same ways, or at least have a cognition for, this is how Derek sees this is how Mike sees this, that ends up having such a big benefit of how they anticipate one another, how they anticipate attacking defenses, how they anticipate where a pass is going to be, where the player is going to be, all these other things. So it's a huge nod to their ability to get down to business, get down to the finer points of the game, which are the things that take you from great to elite.
Yeah, absolutely. Minutia and nuances. That's probably the two best ways you could describe it, for sure. Yeah. And so, look, I think that when it's all said and done, this is going to be something to watch. But I don't think it's just Michael Thomas. You've seen it with Chris Olave. You're seeing it with Juwan Johnson. You're seeing it also with Rashid Shaheed, who wasn't there yesterday. Again, I don't think it's that big of a deal because it's OTAs. Again, it's voluntary. But we'll get into some more of that attendance here in a minute. But again, what he's doing right now, what Derek Carr is doing just in OTAs with Juwan Johnson and Chris Olave, even the fact of Olave, there was a point in team drills where Olave had an open touchdown, right? He ran a great route. Afterwards, he says saying timing, right? The timing is just a hair off. And then He gets the ball back to Derek Carr. Derek Carr throws the ball right back to him in the end zone after everybody's going back to do their thing. I mean, that's the difference is just making sure you rehearse. And I haven't seen that level of detail in a while since Drew was on scene. And again, what we say on here is no knock to any of the other people or any other quarterbacks and stuff, but it is when you say what differences has Derek Carr made or has he had changes, I think those types of things and knowing and understanding his role, that he's not coming in here to take over, like he said, or to rebuild a franchise. He's coming in here to enhance and win football games. And look, even with the John Gruden stuff, what he talked about it, I mean, you see there's merit, and I love what he said on it too, about it, and just talk his comments and how he feels about John Gruden and just finishing each other's sentences and stuff like that. I mean, it sounded like it was a really productive meeting. And I know the optics, again, it doesn't look good, but we talked about that last week on here. But, you know, just to see that attention to detail, and I think for Saints fans, just knowing that this is something they're taking seriously to fix this offense. And we're not even talking about guys like Foster Moreau or Malik Flowers getting a jet sweep and goal line work, you know, with the first team. Or we're not talking about, you know, Jesse James making all these catches. Like, there's a lot more weapons to be excited. Or Traquan Smith, like, where'd this guy come from, right? Like, how crazy of a day he had. I mean, but he was working with Jameis and other things. But, you know, again, you said nuances and minutia. I think those two are going to speak volumes for this offense when it's all said and done. Does it work?
Yeah.
What do you think?
Yeah, I think that's the toughest part, is does it all come together when it matters on the field during the regular season? Obviously, we'll be watching that. But look, I mean, in terms of what you're seeing from OTAs, it's good. And I think that we saw a little bit of back and forth too between the offense and the defense. And so the defense is pushing and the defense is pushing the offense. The offense is pushing the defense. It feels a little bit more like the iron sharpens iron approach of 2018, 2019, as opposed to sort of the wandering, you know, where are we, who are we ness of the last couple of years. And so I think like that's a massive, that's an important piece, but that is also a testament to what Dennis Allen and the New Orleans Saints organization are starting to try to. I'll use the word loosely, not in the football sense, but just in terms of like what they've been doing here, is that they've been rebuilding their culture, and they've been rebuilding like the way that these players associate with one another. Demario Davis is still out there talking, like all of that's still very much a part of what they do. And, you know, Dennis Allen telling guys like Alontae Taylor and the defense that he wants the handshakes, he wants the attitude, he wants the confidence, that, you know, that's an important piece. Like all of that ends up helping you in the football sense too. And I do think that there have been a lot of positive steps forward for the New Orleans Saints so far in terms of where they started at OTAs to where they are now. Now you just want to see those steps forward continue.
Absolutely. And again, OTAs completely voluntary. Some guys we didn't see out there. Taysom Hill, Marshawn Lattimore. We didn't see Alvin Kamara. We didn't see James Hurst, Andres Pete, Ryan Ramczyk. I don't think it's as big of a deal as some people would make it for some of those. But let's talk about somebody who was there 1 out of the 3 weeks that really probably needs to be there is Paulson Adebo. He was there the first week, not there past couple of weeks. Dennis Allen was asked about him yesterday, just kind of gave like a simplistic no update, like no, as far as an update on where he's at. And look, mini camp's right around the corner. That's a mandatory thing. So if he's not there, maybe we'll have a little bit more concern. But for a guy like Adebo, I mean, this is pretty important. It's a crowded secondary as it is, especially at corner. I mean, this is where they're putting Alontae Taylor in the slot. This is giving guys like Isaac Yiadom a chance for more reps too. Big Troy deal that Paulson Adebo. Yeah, Troy Pride. Yeah, definitely can't forget him. He's made some plays in OTAs. Big deal if Paulson's not here. Not a big deal if Paulson's not here.
I think there's a little bit of a big deal aspect to it. I mean, we have to underscore all of this with the fact that OTAs are voluntary and that he could be missing those practices for any reason. It could be family related. It could be personal related. It could be, you know, it's kind of like what we saw with Tyrann Mathieu during training camp last year, to where he was, you know, he wasn't around for the first couple of weeks or the first week, whatever that was, and then rejoined the team, and then everything was Gucci moving forward. And so, you know, it could very well be all that, because the one thing that you look at when it comes to Paulson Adebo, and just from us having our conversations with him in the locker room, is that he loves the game of football. And he loves to compete. And he and Alontae Taylor, at least last year, had a fantastic relationship with one another. The thing that I do think is a little bit of a big deal for Paulson is that he's fighting for a job, effectively. Not necessarily a job, but his role. And so when you've got a guy like Alontae Taylor that's pushing and pushing and pushing to potentially be the starter opposite Marshawn Lattimore, you would imagine that you would want to be there. And if he's not there, you imagine it's for a good reason, because man, him not being present has to have some type of impact on the ability on the fact that they can see, no Alontae, or you can see what Alontae Taylor's doing out there. He made a great play in the back of the end zone against A.T. Perry, the Saints rookie wide receiver, on what would have been a contested catch. But if it's Alontae, it's not contested. It's just not going to be caught, is sort of the rule. And so, that's the confidence that he plays with. And so he's going up against a guy that's 5-6 inches, whatever, taller than he is, and knocking these passes away. And we saw that when it came to Alontae versus DeAndre Hopkins, Alontae versus Devontae Adams, like the great matchups that he had, Zach Ertz, like the great matchups that he played last year and how well he played through those. So I think it might not be a big deal for the Saints if Paulson Adebo is not around. It probably doesn't impact his relationship or anything like that, because again, these are voluntary, but you imagine it has an impact because he does have something to be present and fight for during OTAs.
Yeah, and again, we got a 3-day mini camp coming around. And again, that's a mandatory, especially for veterans, all that type of stuff. So it's really going to be interesting. And I think that's where we'll start to say, okay, these guys not here, who's excused, we'll get all the rundown there. But, those guys that haven't been there, this is the capacity that we would expect. Now, understand that even in mini camp, this still falls under phase 3 of the NFL CBA. So there's still no contact. It's still 7-on-7s permitted, 9-on-7, 11-on-11, all those types of things. But, it's going to be better to see a little bit more understanding before we get, 4 or 5 weeks off until training camp. But, guys that weren't there yesterday, I mean, there's a couple that we touched on in OTA's observations and stuff that left early. Brian Edwards was one of them that left early. And then help me out.
Oh, Anthony Johnson.
And Anthony Johnson, yes, DB from Virginia. But I saw Johnson in the locker room, so I don't think there's too much to worry about. And again, these things happen, so I don't think there's anything to be concerned. But guys like Colin Saunders, he was out celebrating the Super Bowl win with the Chiefs at the White House. So yeah, he's a little busy. So we understand that type of stuff. But somebody that was there, because we always get asked, what do the rookies look like? I know that's the most important thing, right? I dare say, more importantly, what do guys like Peyton Turner look like? Stuff like that, or Zach Bond or Pete Warner. But rookies are important because these guys are expected to be impact players. Isaiah Foskey, Brian Bresee, but Brian Bresee taking first-team reps on defensive line. People are getting excited about that. Is this more of a thing where, they were working on red zone yesterday? So is it more of a, hey, this is because of the look, because people weren't there? What's your take on it?
I think that it could very well be because of the look, because they were working red zone. We also, as you mentioned, Colin Saunders wasn't there. Last week, Nathan Shepard wasn't there, and Malcolm Roach got those snaps with the first team and not Brian Bresee. So I do think that it still shows some progress in his game and the way that he's going through all that. So I do think that while some of it could just be circumstantial based on down, distance, situation, all of those other things, it is still a positive step forward for Bresee, who is trying to, continue to climb the ladder and become a starter with the team. And so I do think that it is still notable that he gets those first team reps. But now, once we get in the training camp, maybe that gives us a lot more opportunity to see, does he hold that position? Does he really climb up there? Is it just situational? All that. So I do think it's a little bit of both. I think that there is like a down and distance conversation to be had in terms of the situation and the look that goes with that. But there is also something to be said in the fact that he got those first team reps in any case. It does still show a little bit of progress. How do you see it?
Yeah, I do think it's progress. I mean, that's the main thing, is you want to see the progress. You want to see these guys working. And I mean, I think there's certain things to say, okay, let's pump the brakes on some of it. Because the only thing that I could think of is like last year, Bryce Thompson was a guy that was standing out in OTAs. Like he was there, first team, playing nickel, doing all those types of things. And then, it does put a little bit of a pressure on some of these guys, because you start seeing them like, oh, they're working with the first team, big deal. And then training camp comes along and then they just kind of fizzle out, or whatever the case may be. But, I think for a rookie, based off of the expectation, I mean, they really, really like Brian Bresee. They love him, Isaiah Foskey. These guys are going to make big differences for this defensive line. And I think it just goes along where, again, we've had these conversations, just you think about their sack production, just affecting the quarterback. Most of that stuff has come from the second level, maybe sending blitzes with your defensive backs and stuff, but they need a better push, a better, guts or guys from in the trenches. I mean, Cam and Carl Granderson, they do a good job, right? But I think the interior, that's why I was so surprised in guys like David Onyemata and, no disrespect to Shy Tuttle or anything, or any of those guys to getting paid. Tuttle's more of your run blocking president or run plugger, but Onyemata just had flashes a couple of times. Like he just was not the dominant player that he had been in previous years, but he still ended up getting paid, or a Marcus Davenport getting paid what he did. But, I think that Bresee is going to learn more. I think he's got a great coach in front of him. And that's what I think the biggest takeaway is. That I feel like this coaching staff is in a position where it feels like they're all united. And again, you got to remember, I think we've touched on this too, is that you had Sean Payton's guys. You're in Sean Payton's shadow a little bit. Now you're Dennis Allen. Dennis Allen has his staff, his guys that he wants to run everything with. And the hope is that they all support GA in what they're trying to do. And they've got great defensive minds there to be able to do it. But, one thing about Grantham and just sticking with Bresee is they brought him in to help with the RPO, the run, the mobile quarterback and all that type of stuff. And so they got guys now, athleticism to deal with it with Foskey, and Bresee is a guy that you can rotate on the line. But I think it's a big deal. I think it's something that we're going to only see flourish a little bit more as the season goes along. It may not be something that you pay immediate dividends. Like, it's not going to surprise me to say Bresee gets 20 to 25 snaps in the first game, which then it's all rotational work. You know what I'm saying?
Right.
Same thing with Foskey.
For sure.
It's just that remains to be seen, but I expect the rotational approach this year.
Yeah, I would agree with that, especially early, and then maybe as the season goes on, those numbers start to bolster a little bit. But especially early, I think it'll still continue to be that, and even still throughout the season, it'll continue to be a rotation. You just might see them get the lion's share eventually of that. To your point about creating a more like attacking defensive line, I think everything that the Saints have done so far this offseason on the interior tells you exactly that, and proves exactly what you're saying. Correct. You look at Colin Saunders, ranks right around the same place as Shy Tuttle in 2022 when it came to run stop percentage, but his pass rush win rate was about 30 spots better, according to Pro Football Focus. Nathan Shepard ranked right around the same place in run stop percentage as David Onyemata, but was about 16 spots better when it came to pass rush win rate, which actually at the position, which actually put him top 10 amongst all defensive tackles in 2022. Then you add a guy like Brian Bresee, to where when you ask Dennis Allen, like, how are you feeling about his development so far? What does he highlight? He highlights his quick twitch ability. He highlights his ability to be able to move around and attack the quarterback. And so I think that everything about what the Saints have done on the interior shows you exactly what it is that you're highlighting, that this team wants to be able to attack up the middle, especially in a division that now features two young quarterbacks and then a remains to be seen quarterback room with the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. And one of those young quarterbacks is 5'10", 5'11". And so getting that pressure immediately up the middle and right in his face, as we have seen with, days of Drew Brees' past, that's the way to impact those sort of smaller statured quarterbacks. And so I think everything that the Saints have done so far ticks towards that trend.
Absolutely. I mean, and I'm excited to see it. I wish we had a game next week, right?
I know.
I'm excited to see preseason. Just even the fact that they're doing joint practices with Texans and Chargers back-to-back weeks. I think that's invaluable expertise or invaluable knowledge. And I think Derek Carr talked about it yesterday too, just being able to go up against that extra competition. Just they're going to give you different looks. I think that's going to be huge, especially for some of these other younger guys where we're going to see them fly and off the charts as far as the way they perform and such. Maybe just closing out our thoughts on OTAs, maybe your standout players, give me one or two that stood out the most to you. Maybe if you have a most improved, if not, no big deal, but standout players and any thoughts that you maybe missed from yesterday that you want to share.
Yeah, no, I'll jump right to standout players and most improved. And I'm afraid that I might steal some of your guys here, but I think
that's
we might
okay.
have some overlap.
We should all see the same thing, right?
Yeah, I hope so. But like standout players for me, for sure, Chris Olave has been, remarkable all throughout. Yeah. I think you wrote this in observations too, that he has probably been the best player throughout the 3 weeks of OTAs combined, or at least the most standout player. So I think obviously him. I'm gonna leave the quarterback out of the conversation because quarterback's always going to stand out no matter what, especially when the receivers are standing out as well. That's always going to happen. So I'll go Chris Olave. Over on the defensive side, I think one of the bigger standouts for me has been DeMarco Jackson. He's still got some things to fix up, but I mean, this guy being somebody that has come in, he missed his entire rookie season. The Saints did not go out and get a veteran linebacker, at least so far this offseason. They might do that when it comes to training camp, but now they're trading him as an off-ball linebacker when he had a little bit more of a pass rushing, run stopping, on-ball role at App State before they drafted him in the 5th round last year. Then they're, equipping him as the guy with the communication set. And, so he's the one that's the Mike linebacker. He's calling the shots, calling the coverages, making the defensive calls, things like that. He's made a couple of nice plays throughout OTAs. And I think most improved has got to be Tre'Quan Smith, because this was a guy that came in and we were kind of like, okay, well, he might be on the out here because they've continued to load up this wide receiver room, but then he goes off yesterday the way that he did, in the 3rd week of OTAs, but has made some nice moments and made some nice catches throughout as well, that like it's hard not to look at him and say, okay, well, let's see what more he has throughout training camp.
Yeah, I agree. Olave's got to be the top guy. I think I put Rashid Shaheed because I love what he did in the first 2 weeks, and I love what Juwan Johnson did. I think those three were the easiest guys on offense that you said, okay, everybody can look. I'll tell you, I'll go a little bit different route. I'll say maybe some under the radar guys. For me, first one I'd say is Lucas Kroll. Kind of a little bit sneaky the way he's been doing. I think he's somebody that could be ascending, and I think he has an opportunity to, especially with Taysom not being there. But Taysom is going to be in the tight end room, something Dennis Allen talked and confirmed yesterday. So that is a little bit more. And again, something we reported back a long time ago is that they feel like they have a better understanding of how to utilize him. So really excited to see Lucas Kroll, a little bit more of him. Defensively, man, I really love the play that Lonnie Johnson Jr. made yesterday.
Oh, yeah.
It was over the middle. It was a sure touchdown to Chris Olave working against Derek Carr. Put his hand up. He was in perfect awareness recognition. Those are the type of plays that you kind of notice a good bit. I think guys, you mentioned Troy Pride is a guy to keep an eye on. I've seen some stuff from Jordan Howden on the defensive side. And then Isaac Yiadom. I think a guy that's more known for a special teams guy. He's been thrust into roles with, where he's having to be the top corner and he might get beat on one play, but comes back and responds well on the next play. I think that's kind of been for me. And so I think when I talk about players in that route, besides Tre'Quan, Zach Bond, I've noticed him a little bit more often than normal. I think that's another one for me. So I think those are some of the players that I say maybe just keep an eye on. It's hard to gauge what offensive linemen, defensive linemen do. You mentioned the quarterback spot. I will say Blake Grupe.
Yes.
I'm thinking Bresee, but Blake Grupe had a really good bounce back day yesterday. Hit all of his kicks. And the thing is, and I wrote about this when I was previewing, he has the leg to hit from 62 easily. And he's a small guy, but he did not have a good first outing last week. But, man, he did it in a big way, and it was really cool to see the team respond after he hit that 58-yarder. So, few of them, but more to watch and more to see. And I just can't wait till training camp gets here, but we'll have mini camp right around the corner. Any parting thoughts, shots, and remarks before we get out of here?
Parting shots? Well, I'm not going to take a shot at anybody. No, I'm just kidding. No,
you could.
I think. I'll highlight one other guy, Jesse James, the new tight end. The Saints tight end room has gone from this massive concern to now having 4 NFL players all of a sudden, potentially starter caliber development out of all these guys. And great catch from Jameis on a throw from Jameis. So it's an up the seam in the red zone, very Drew Breesian era. New Orleans Saints. So it was
Jameis looked good yesterday too.
Yeah, he really had a nice day yesterday.
Really good.
Really, really nice day. And he made Tre'Quan Smith look great too. So I mean, I can't get enough of what we've seen from Tre'Quan. I think it's so cool because I think that there's this grace that's given to play callers and coaches in the NFL of Andy Reid didn't do anything until his 6th year. Sean McVay had an outstanding 5th year. And so the way that we look at coaches, I think is also maybe the way that we should consider looking at players, in that I know you want more immediate stuff, but even if they don't give that to you yet, give them the time to develop. Maybe we're seeing that sort of 5th Sean McVay year, that 5th Kyle Shanahan year coming from Tre'Quan Smith here, or at least loading, what I mean? And whether he does it in New Orleans or does it elsewhere, we'll find out, but it's been cool to see.
Yeah, he said elsewhere. There's a certain other coach who might like him if he does.
He's got 2 other teammates waiting for him if he needs it. Former teammates.
Yes, sir. Well, Ross, always a pleasure to hang out, guys. We really appreciate the support here on Saints News Network, but also support Ross and his other endeavors and Locked On for sure. Make sure you tune into him. He covers this team daily. One of the up and coming rising guys that are just keeps ascending. So give him some love. And Ross, where can people find your work?
Yeah.
What's the easiest way?
Yeah, easiest way is on Twitter at Ross Jackson Nola, N-O-L-A. That's the easiest way to do it. That's where everything is. It's right there, right here. Right
there. Yeah, so check him out on Locked On and keep up with all of our information and latest and greatest from Saints News Network, saints.media or si.com/NFL/Saints. For Ross Jackson, I'm John Hendrix signing out. We'll talk at you next week. Saints mini camp. 3 days. Woo. 3 days. We'll talk. Tons of stuff. All right, guys.